All right, everybody, welcome to the second panel of Refi Meets the World. Really excited for just another opportunity to learn. This event has been so eye-opening for me so far. I knew it would be, and again, coming from that normie world, I am blown away by how much fun this has been so far. But in the process of continuing the conversation, we are going to start a second panel. So I want to hand it over to Shingi.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining again. We're joined by Tony Tiyou. He's the founder of Renewables in Africa. You may have seen some of his content if you're on the clean tech or climate facing side of LinkedIn. He also has a YouTube channel. I've been on a couple of his episodes, kind of talking to topics related to things like um, electricity and GDP, and more. The focus of this particular panel is on the other side of the coin. So, we've been talking a lot about the on-chain side, the blockchain side of things, but we but we also have and I'm hearing that I might have some technical difficulties, so bear with me. But on the other side, we also have the real economy. And what is it that we're leveraging blockchain to actually help finance? So Tony has extensive experience with clean energy development, with solar in Africa. And what I wanted to do in this conversation was really just kind of talk about what are some of the opportunities in the space of clean energy in the global south, in Africa, for example, that we could actually leverage blockchain to help support the deployment of more and more clean energy. So, Tony, I want to thank you for hopping on. I know it's a little bit late in London, but just kind of welcome. And would you give a little bit of a background about yourself? I know I introduced you a little bit, but some more details for the folks that are meeting you for the first time.
No problem. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, listen, first of all, that's my first time on Discord. I think I'm finding it very interesting so far. So, because I can see that I don't have an actually an emoji that's as obviously seems original as some of you guys. But just introduce myself. So, my name is Tony Tiyou, founder and CEO of this company called Renewables in Africa. And then I've been running the business for more than 6 years. And obviously, we've gone through multiple business models to find the right fit for us. Ultimately, what is that we do right now? It's very simple. We have two mandates. First mandate is to raise awareness about renewables energy in Africa and across the world. Because I found that to make sure that things happen to Africa, you need to talk to the world. That's actually how it happened. And in doing that, we're working a lot with businesses and helping them to basically to be financially sound, to get the leads that they need, to make the sales that they need. So it's very much important, right? So that those are the things that we will do, and that's our first mandate. The second mandate, as a developer ourselves, so we're working with some businesses in Africa who are looking for clean energy solutions. The sort of thing I'm talking about here would be a rooftop solar, for example, that we can get installed at their premises in order for them to to have the clean source of power that they're looking for and mitigate both the power cut but also electricity cost who's actually rising pretty much everywhere these days. So, and I guess Shinya said so. Finance is a big questions, right? So, how can we plug the gap? We need about 30 billion every year. That's from various estimate. Very far from that at the moment. So the question is to know what are the other way we could look at to plug this gap, and that's what this kind of conversation is quite timely. I'm just gonna stop it there. That's a brief intro by myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's helpful background. So, as I said, Tony is somebody that knows intimately sort of the challenges of operating on the ground. And I think and this is there'll be a whole other panel on this topic, but I think one of the challenges that we're seeing in this was a challenge in Web 2, and we're seeing it again in Web 3. And I say it a lot. I said it in the opening statement, but we see a lot of people that are that are developers. We see a lot of people that are, on the finance side of things. But from a subject matter expertise perspective, people that are actually in the field in some space where blockchain could be leveraged, we don't. We're starting to see more of it, but that's something that I think is going to be really valuable, to bring more people like Tony into the space. So, in terms of just like starting out from quite, from a Q&A or a sort of expert opinion perspective, why don't we start by setting the scene for folks around some of the core challenges that you face on the ground with regard to financing? Maybe starting with like the life cycle of a given rooftop solar project.
Yeah, that's for me to answer, right? Just want to check.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good, good, good. Well, if you're talking about rooftop solar project, for example, I can speak about one we did in Nigeria, for example, back in February, where we actually reached the financial close at that time. So the it takes a certain amount of time to develop the project. That is to go from the originations all the way to the financial close, right? So you do in that phase. So obviously you approach the customer, obviously pitch to him, convince to him that solar is a good option for him to look at, present the design, do the pros and cons, basically all the sales process, right? So you guys, I guess, will be at least have an idea what it could look like. And when you reach financial close, so all of that period of time, it could take anything between, realistically, I'm talking about obviously in the case of Africa, because I guess other places could be faster, and usually it's actually faster other places. You're looking at anything between 6 months to, it could potentially even be 18 months. It depends how complex it could potentially be. Now, in terms, one of the biggest issues, so for this project, as I usually have said, it's actually not technical. Technically, there's always a solution that could be found to some respect. So once you've established that the projects happen in an environment where it's relatively business friendly, so you now have to raise the money for that, right? And one thing that I've found is in the renewable energy space, especially across the continent, when you come out those big utility projects, obviously which obviously would get easily financing as long as they are properly they're well structured. Those other projects, for example, rooftop solar. So we're talking about what here? We're talking about in terms of capacity, anything between, I would say, 200 kilowatts all the way to kilowatts. That's on the commercial industrial space, right? So basically, businesses. That's what I'm talking about. That's what you see.
Mhm.
However, for many of the financier out there, it's still way too small for them, right? And as you probably will be aware, and or at least you will have heard it, it takes about the same amount of work to from a transaction cost perspective to work on a 200 kilowatt that would do for 5 megawatts. So, and people prefer then the big one, right? Because obviously margin are bigger and it makes their job more worthy. So finding source of finance for this kind of project is very, 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 very difficult. I'll give you an example. At the moment, I'm helping this company in DRC, in Congo, to raise some money for because they are a solar installer in Congo, Kinshasa, is the capital. That's where they're focusing. So obviously, the raising money, which is about $1 million, normally would not be a lot, right? So I've approached this company, uh, which obviously we I met them several months ago, end of last year. So obviously they put up a fund. Part of it, they're raising money from crowd investors. So they sounded very interested. I sent them the deck of the project. Came back to me, told me that, oh, project is interesting, but guess what? They want they want the thing is way too early stage. They're only gonna look at that once this guy have been able to reach $1 million revenue and having equity about 500,000. And it just made me smile and laugh because always a lot of structure like that will come and say they want to work on project in Africa, they want to support project in Africa, they come up with for me with some requirement that for me it's definitely not connected to reality. The reality is, if you guys maybe will not know, you're asking for a company that will have $1 million revenue in Africa. It's almost like you're saying here, the UK and the US, right? So I'm putting up that funds. I want to help people to grow, but I just want to talk to them once they reach $10 million. That's the similarity. $1 million in Africa is huge. When you do that
Mhm.
for me, that means that you're already excluding a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. And that's the kind of issue we're having with financing. That's the reason I wanted to talk about that. Just to say that you have a lot of initiative like that put up by, let's say, owners or whatever, that are not fit for purpose. And this is why we need to look at regional source of funding, and blockchain could be a potential solution, such as maybe carbon market, and such as, for example, ESG financing. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing I think we need to obviously unlock the challenge that we are having. Yeah, sorry guys, I think I can speak all day for this thing, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor, so at least you can connect it to a proper case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. I think the other question I have to follow up is, what are, in the current state, what are the kinds of investors that you currently have access to for these projects?
Yeah. So the uh, uh, for this project, there are some funds I would invest in such project, but they're not a lot of them. This is my one of my main challenges. There's only few of them actually, and then and it would depend as well where they want to operate the territory. I think most of them will be comfortable with likes of South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana. Those are obviously the big economies, so they like it. Other countries, they're a little bit let's say lukewarm. So yeah,
Mhm.
so those funds will be available, and if you're not talking to those private funds that have been set, you're talking about GFIs, yeah,
Mhm.
GFIs or some donor initiative looking at grant funding. But for me, I hate grant funding definitely, because
Mhm.
I don't think that's the right way of doing that. I want to have commercial offer that makes sense, because for me that's what is viable in the long term. The reason I don't like grant is because grant is all dependent on whoever is running the program agenda at the time. It can change at any point in time. As soon as, for example, there's a change of government and the donors countries, the grant can stop. So that's why for me it has to be something commercial. It's much more viable in the long term. Yeah, that is what there's definitely a need for new kind of financing in the space, so new thinking.
Mhm.
And I'm constantly thinking about new solutions to look at what could potentially happen. Yeah. In fact,
Yeah.
at some point, I was actually thinking myself, we're still thinking about pushing up a fund ourselves, but we're seeing the process. A long way from there, definitely. So, but it's part of the idea. And that's what obviously
Yeah.
I'm here to discuss, to see,
Yeah.
what kind of thing you guys have been doing, and how can we find some inspiration there?
Yeah. Well, the other panelists that had planned to attend Brave New Dow, they actually do focus on they're basically a DAO that funds projects that do debt financing through the DAO. So it would have been interesting to talk to. He might join
Okay.
a little bit later on. But I think even without him, the also to what you had just mentioned in terms of like the pursuit of alternative routes, um, w- things like Brave New DAO and those other kinds of investment structures through blockchain make a lot of sense in terms of like direct financing for projects. The one thing that I'm curious about is, a lot of these groups are going to be groups of people who are not subject matter experts. So I guess there are two parts to the question. One is, how would a DAO or some sort of blockchain investment group, how would investors actually conduct due diligence on a project? And at what stage would they even start to conduct that due diligence?
Okay. So essentially, I'm not looking at a due diligence that will be different from what other people are doing, which is the traditional due diligence process, right? So what for me, what would be different is the source of financing. The rest, I
Mhm,
think the due diligence process it's standard enough. That means they'll be looking at the business, looking at the business model, looking at whether they make revenue, looking at the team, basically all these questions that we know. But
mhm,
imagine blockchain company will also conduct the exact same thing. Now, when is the time to get involved? I would say for me, as early as possible. Why?
mhm,
Simply because when you come early stage, you may have the opportunity to influence, the project sponsor. Maybe there is something, it's important for you in your process when you do your due diligence, and you want them to pay attention to that early on.
mhm.
So that's great to intervene at that time. Now, it doesn't mean that it could be a light engagement at that time, just saying that, hey, listen, just give me post-its at what stage you are at. And just to help you, let me share with you at this stage with a list of requirements that we will look at later on. So it'll be good if you make sure that as you're designing and developing your project, designing it, so you definitely pay attention to those criteria so that we know later on we can look at that and be satisfied. So in short, the due diligence process will be won't be different from what other people are saying,
Mhm.
and when to intervene. I would say as early as possible. But,
Yeah.
that's what I would say, so that you can influence the process.
So in our first panel, we had David Zhao as well as another entrepreneur who's focused on sort of the analytics around governance, and they talked a lot about ESG, and you referenced ESG as well towards the very beginning, and so I'm wondering, just maybe this is theoretical, if if ESG was also a component for this hypothetical blockchain investment group, what does that look like? You know, what does ESG look like from a solar or a rooftop solar project perspective?
So how does it look like for that? So I think the ESG, as we all know, so environment, social governance, and all of that. Um, I guess the different aspect that they will be looking. Yeah, one is obviously from the environmental point of view, or the emissions that are being preserved. So, what is the contribution of the project on that side? And definitely, when if you're talking about that from the environmental point of view, solar projects, a wind project, a biomass project, tick the level boxes there. So definitely they will respect that. Also, most of the time, those, for example, in the case of Africa, so what those, because I think uh, power, solar, which is a source of power, it's there to actually is an enabler. It actually unlocks something, especially in the case of commercial industrial customer. Those are businesses. Those businesses behind actually will allow the business to grow significantly, and there's a great number of economic benefit also translate into social benefit. So from that standpoint, I think from an ESG perspective, we actually ticking a lot of boxes. So it's almost like
Mhm.
those are ESG project by excellence.
Yeah,
I would say yeah. So that's that's what I could say. Yeah.
that makes sense, and that actually got me thinking about something too. So, you know, the big question is like, what does the investment structure look like, right? From a U.S. perspective, we have the Securities and Exchange Commission that's starting to formulate a coherent policy around crypto. In fact, in particular, what is crypto classified as a commodity or is it a security? And the way that you described it, that definitely sounds like crypto as a security, which, if that's the case, that's even more to your point about the structure itself maybe not being that different, and maybe it's simply the rails or the financial network that's used to actually move capital from one place to another. Is that, I mean, is what's your take on that?
Oh, you get me into the technicalities there. So the the real answer for me how to categorize crypto investment in this case, I wouldn't really know. I guess it would depend on the actual structure of the project, isn't it? Right? And
Mhm.
then and how really this investment is been channeled into the project. I
Yeah.
guess depending how it's done, I guess the answer may be the answer may be different, whether it's a utility or security. I think those are questions because I think, as you know, Shingi, so I have I have worked on a blockchain renewable energy project. Back in the day, 2008, 2018, yes, around that when we were doing
Mhm.
that pilot in Puerto Rico. And
Mhm.
those were the kind of question at the time as well we're looking to wrestle with, basically. So
Mhm.
it's a difficult answer for me to give you. I think you gotta be very knowledgeable. I'm also looking being careful about what I'm actually saying when I know that I
Mhm.
have some limited information as to how to properly classify them.
That's true. That's fair. And maybe I'll tailor that question, or to reshape that question. Is it more valuable from a developer's perspective? Is it more valuable for the investment to be in the company or the business itself, or for the investment to be in, say, a power purchase agreement? So they'd be investors for the actual individual project.
Yeah. So I guess the way uh, industry work at the moment, so it tends to be best as especially for debt, it tends to be best to be structured as project finance. As such, is connected to the power purchase agreement
Mm,
and connected to the revenue that the company is generating, as opposed to be connected to the actual company where it actually becomes a corporate debt. That's how thing has been structured. It's probably because as well as a power purchase, when it's going to the power purchase, the structure around that to build that it's relatively simpler, right? You're not really in a case whereby you need to be able to bring a lot of collateral in this case because you're not
mm,
actually lending money to the actual structure of the company. It's more you're looking at the project, looking
mhm,
at what is the revenue attached to this project. Are they sound?
mm,
We have an off taker who is capable of paying, which is actually where everything starts. And then it becomes okay because if you do that, if in between the sponsor happen to fail, you can actually replace the sponsor by another one because what is important here in this case is the actual off taker who is actually giving you paying who is actually paying the power purchase agreement. So that's why it makes it easier. Whereby, as opposed to having it connected to the company, and if that company is the sponsor, so having a
mm.
problem, so it's become a little bit more difficult for you to recoup your money.
So that's interesting. So it's what the picture you're painting is actually one that I talk about a lot, of like a truly asset-backed crypto investment in that case, since the asset is the cash flowing power purchase agreement. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And I guess I think I was reading at some point in time. I think the summary of this conversation where you were saying that it's time also to make sure that crypto are connected to the real economy as much as possible. That would prevent some of the issues that we're seeing happening right now at this point in time. I personally actually really I agree with that because
Yeah.
this way it becomes a lot easier to properly value them, like when there is a proper asset backing that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that sort of prevent or at least manage help you to manage better the speculation. And it's actually the speculation that bring a lot of problems as well most of the time. So
Yeah.
asset
I agree
back
with
for
you on
me, I think
that one. Yeah.
that is that's what I would say.
So thinking then about the environment that you're operating within, there are beyond just sort of the high level, institutional investment sort of just not being where it could be right now. There are also local issues, with regard to things like local policy, um, local currency strength, weakness, the issue of like on ramping and off ramping. So I think, maybe the high level question there is, what are some of the risks that are particular to your operating environment that a crypto fund or a crypto investor would have to consider, in addition to just like the diligence of the project itself? Can you hear me?
Tony, did we lose you? It's only a little ironic that tech issues happen in a conversation about tech, I would say.
Yeah, that's
We're working with we're working with Tony. In all fairness, Tony did say this is his first Discord entry, so I'm impressed because it took me so long to learn Discord.
yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna,
No,
I'm
it's
gonna remove him
um
from the stage and then bring him right back.
okay. Well, that sounds good. And I guess while you're doing that, I think maybe getting a little bit more context, behind my question. So, so one is, you know, there are a few countries that Tony operates within. There are 50, 54, 56 countries on the African continent. I think that there are I think only three that have GDP per capita that would put them, in I guess it's GDP per capita. And with that, there are lots of issues in each individual country with regards to things like currency strength, or not even like the stereotypical kind of thing, but just more like the actual technical aspects of how they're actually running the economy and how they're actually managing their currency. And those are some of the things that, you know I'm really interested in getting Tony's perspective on, in terms of like what are the potential risks that, um, these are the same kinds of risks that make the institutional investors balk a little bit in terms of investing in Africa. But there may be a different perspective
Mm.
from a blockchain standpoint. But anyway, back to you, Tony.
Can you hear me?
The original question was, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
I don't know
good.
if you heard my question, or if you dropped
I
off
think
before then, but
I would appreciate if you can rephrase it. Yeah, that's fine. Repeat it. That's fine.
sure, sure, sure. So the question that I had was, in particular for the specific country that you operate in, what are some of the market risks that a blockchain investor would have to deal with on top of just sort of the normal market risks that you have? And so, thinking more along the lines of like on-ramping, off-ramping, um, political acceptance of cryptocurrency.
Did we lose you now, Shingy?
I'm here.
Can you guys hear
Can you
me?
hear me? I can hear
Oh,
you,
you're
Tony.
back. You're back.
Okay, that's fine. Because I thought this time was again me. But I think I kind of heard your question. You're essentially
Hmm.
looking at what kind of typical risk will challenge we have here for blockchain investors as opposed
Yep.
to the traditional one that other guy will have, right? So in a nutshell, that's what you were asking.
That's
So
exactly what I asked. Yeah.
okay, gotcha. So what I would say in this case, right? So I think I'm probably gonna be talking about the blockchain investor. I'll be keen to understand. I guess if I have one coming to one of my project, I'd be interested to understand what kind of currency actually he wants to use, right?
Mhm.
First of all. So does it still want to stay on the blockchain using one of the cryptos? So in which case you clearly said it right. So it's about looking at whether or not it's allowed or not, right? Because the thing is, most of the time in many of those countries in Africa, so I'm not even sure crypto is still. I don't even think it's properly regulated. You may have countries like Kenya, Nigeria, are a bit more advanced because there's a lot of activity on that in that side. But the others, I don't know. I think probably understanding the issue of one, would the regulation allow me to deal with with that investor, and especially if that investor wanna. I also figured out what kind of currency they want to do. And after that, just
Mhm.
understanding. So, what is the risk appetite that they're having? Yeah. So this is something very much interesting for me to work. What kind of risk appetite and what kind of return they're expecting. But a lot of these markets, when I also say it's unregulated, regulated doesn't mean that you can't do it. In fact, it means that you can do whatever you want to do. You just have to be a little bit more cautious. That's all it means as far as I'm concerned. So those are probably the initial questions I would immediately think about. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What kind of what kind of do you see uh, in terms of this becoming potentially a normal thing? Because I know, for example, in Nigeria, there's a quite large cryptocurrency market. When you compare with the naira, local currency, you see, a lot of Nigerians adopting, Bitcoin and Ethereum as their primary store of value. Do you see sort of a lag between now and when that starts to trickle into at least small scale investment, or is that something that's already happening? Have you seen?
I think I suspect a lot of it is already happening, just not being reported. Yeah, so
Mhm.
because obviously many of these guys sometimes they want to stay relatively discreet. I know, for example, in Cameroon, the country where I come from, so there is an exchange as was specifically set to allow people in that part of Africa, Central Africa, to have access to blockchain finance and also exchange, right? Which was a little bit difficult for them to get hold of before. So I believe a lot of this kind of investment already happening. It just been toned down. You talked about Nigeria. I know Zimbabwe as well. You will have a lot of it simply because if this is the thing. Many of those currency in the continent are just so volatile. In fact, it's better for this guy to operate with cryptos. And I know a lot of people are scared about the volatility in crypto as well. But at the end of the day, it's no different than many of those other currencies, basically. And it's even feel better because then yeah, I think that's the way sometimes I see that you see a lot of people just will will share that. So I think a lot of those investments already happening. Yeah, just
Mhm.
not talking enough about them, and they are happening because, like I said, unfortunately, so because there's not just the issue of the the devaluation of the currency. Also have to talk about the speed of the transaction. And what, for example, me personally, that's why I love crypto. That's actually what got me into crypto,
Mhm.
got me interested into crypto. The speed of the transaction is something phenomenal. And especially when you
Mhm.
are in those countries, it's not easy for them to participate in global finance.
Yeah.
But the fact that the blockchain will sort of solve this problem is something people are very interested to. All of a sudden, you may have somebody building a solar project. I don't know. Just pick another country. Let's say, hey, Burundi, and he wanna pay his supplier in China. I know it's not allowed in China, but okay, let's take another country. I don't know.
Yeah.
What could I say? Thailand, for example. Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to pay one of the supplier there, right? If I'm using the traditional bank, he's gonna have all sort of issues. First of all, is his local bank connected to an international bank that can then transfer the fund to this guy and blah blah blah. It's gonna take a couple of weeks, 3 weeks for the guy to get the money. He can just agree to sort everything out on the blockchain. And all of a sudden, that same transaction, as opposed to taking a month, it would take a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And that's allowed this guy to participate, like I say, in global finance. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
people as well in Africa. They don't have access to bank accounts. That's something
Yeah.
thing that we forget. So yeah, that's and on top of the fact that a lot of those currency are also being controlled uh, by some countries. For example, if you look at Francophone Africa, so the currency is pegged to the euros, and not a lot of people in those countries like it. Yeah, so they want to have some kind of independence as well, the way they deal with the money. So you have all those kind of issues that actually, or incentive reason that is pushing people to actually turn towards the blockchain to do some of their transaction. Yeah, I know there's a lot of risk there, but personally, I believe there's a lot of it happening in the continent. We're just not reporting it enough.
Yeah. So what does that mean then in terms of your viewpoint for the next 12 months? So just kind of give me kind of time bound. Like, do you see, especially as this recession potentially deepens? I mean, do you see a greater willingness to adopt currencies outside of the national currency? Do do you see states responding to that by either accepting that way or by fighting harder? Like, what's your perspective on that from the ground?
Yeah, my view is definitely going to grow. And I give you an example. Probably or may not have heard of this country, Central Africa, where the president created a token, and then and he has also passed a law for that currency to become a national tender. Right? Obviously, at the moment, it's having a lot of issues because a lot of the traditional financiers don't like it, because obviously it can
Mhm.
send a signal to other countries. But this guy, they are, as far as I can see for now, they keep it strong. What I'm saying that, a couple of years down before, you wouldn't see that before. You also have San Salvador has done it. All of that, it's actually inspiring other countries just to follow suit. So I believe in the next 12 months, you're going to have more and more movement like that. It may be slow, but definitely it will happen. And it will happen because, like I said, there is a real necessity. People want to transact, people want to participate in finance. Africa is 1.3 billion. Like I say, there's just a tiny minority that's connected to the global finance system as we know it. So the rest of them
Mhm.
don't. By
Yeah.
2050, the continent gonna be 2 billion, and all these other guys, they also need to do business. They also need to,
Yeah.
to transact, as I say. So who do you think they're gonna turn to? For them to open a bank account, they need to meet so many requirements. Very difficult. For blockchain, obviously the limit is a lot lower. So that allowed them to, as I say, to join that system and being able to participate in the global economy. So for me, in the
Yeah.
12 months, we're gonna see more and more that I'm convinced about. Blockchain, everybody knows, or
Yeah.
such as crypto, is here to stay. Obviously, because the barrier to entry is so low, so that means there's a bit of everybody there. So it needs to clean up.
Yeah.
That we all agree with that. That is definitely here to stay, and then and slowly but slowly, he will grow. That's that I'm convinced about.
Yeah. Do you see a backlash from government?
Oh, there's always going to be a backlash government, isn't it? Right? The government like to keep things centralized, and they like to control things to a certain perspective. So
Yeah.
the actual idea of blockchain is that given the decentralized aspect, meaning that it's not into the hands of a few people. So and government is losing some control there. They will. I mean, I can't see a government that will actually like it anywhere in the world, right? Some tolerate to some extent, but just by the nature of government, they're not bound to like it. So I'm simply saying that kind of reaction you see across the world is not going to be different in Africa. I think you will have some country that would tolerate, some other regime no, because they know that you can't really control your people this way. You can apply pressure
Yeah.
the way you want to. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I really appreciate you giving these perspective. I think this is like really valuable. Um, one observation that I see, I've made is that there we have an opportunity now to engage more people who operate in the global south. I think a lot of the financial systems that we live with right now have been created for and by people in developed countries, particularly Anglo countries and France and Germany. And it shows in sort of the dynamic of the whole system. I see that for a lot more people to start, as you say, being involved in the global economy. And I think blockchain allows for great levels of velocity and money. And with more people touching dollars, that's more economy that happens. So that can only be a good thing. But I guess the challenge is really just about lining up these systems, getting the investors to trust the space, to trust people to be able to execute in Africa. It's a difficult place to do business. But do you feel optimistic? Do you feel pessimistic? Like, what is your take
Well, for
on?
me, I think for me, I'm feeling very optimistic. I tell you what, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah,
today I was on my way. I think I was coming back from an interview at BBC because I go there on a regular basis, just to give my opinion as an expert to one of the programs, some of the program. And it was so funny because when I was coming back, we're looking at the underground, the tube, right, the way we call it in London. So I could see this commercial, it was actually a Ripple commercial, and it was like, wow, that's actually quite something. Like it's a big one where everybody could see that. And just a few years ago, you wouldn't see crypto being advertised, so openly. Yeah. So it was always a small thing. So definitely, and that you could see that definitely the space is changing. Plus the fact that some of the big guys now have added that as one of the options that they, especially asset manager, thing like that they offer to the members. So clearly the sector is changing. So investors are starting to look at the space, trusting and backing some of those ventures. So the same as well will happen in the case of Africa. Those investors looking at Africa, I think, because most of the time what you'll find is uh, these are the same guy that you will see in different different continent, right? So they will start to adopt it more and more, and because they will do that as well, that will also encourage, I guess, typical blockchain investor to also look at this at the sector. Personally, I feel very optimistic. However, it doesn't mean that it will happen tomorrow. It's probably going to take more time that we think or we would like. But definitely, the best way to look at that, just do a flashback 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would see that picture that we see was a completely different. We weren't even talking about have the conversation that one we're having right now, where we're talking about some of this guy venturing out in the space, looking to do something. There wasn't even an example like that. But now you definitely can see one or two examples happening, and that's how things happen. And that's how actually the movement start to take shape. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is really illuminating. Really appreciate you joining in late in the evening your time to drop some knowledge on us, Tony.
Yeah. Well, I think I love this kind of conversation. I don't know. I wanna one of the guys maybe have a has a questions in the audience. I just wanted. I can see we got a few guys there, few people.
I'm gonna jump in. I did have a question for you too, Tony. And it's kind of a similar question I've asked a couple of the other people. Is obviously something that I see from just I'll call myself a normie, a casual NFT collector, right on the Flow blockchain, very small, just a couple art projects and a couple utility projects. You know, obviously the promotion of green energy, clean energy, sustainability, and climate crisis is it and me and Shingy and I talked about it earlier. It's a difficult conversation to get people interested in. I don't know why it's very tough, but in the sense of urgency, which is what we have right here. What have you found to be kind of the best way? And I know this is a very general question, but what's the best way to like talk to people about this that you've experienced? Like, is there like a strategy you use, or is it coffee table talk, or is it at conferences? Like, what's some of the best conversations you've had of like bringing people onto these ideas and
Okay.
concepts?
So bringing people out. Okay. Uh, what kind of audience are we talking about? We're talking about investors. We talk. So the people that you say we're looking to bring to space or convince. So who are they? And that was
Yeah, yeah, I would say just from my standpoint, just like the average person, I'd say maybe even go as specific as saying even like an NFT collector, right? For
Mhm.
we in April we have NFT NYC coming up, and I'm just trying to get a pulse on like how to better promote these urgencies.
Okay. Okay. So I see. I see what you're saying. So the usually one thing that I know for these guys, pretty much different people I'm talking to, or who could be potentially investors. I know people like to make a difference, right? That's usually what they set out to do, whatever they do. They like to make a difference, and they like their investment, and they also like to make sure that their investment actually uh, 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 bring returns, right? So from a different perspective, is maybe showing what the investment is actually doing on the ground for people. That could be, especially people that could be subject to some of the consequences of what we're seeing right now, so climate change also. Because it's very easy in our countries to sit still and enjoy the quality of life that you have. But it's something else when you see what other people are actually going through, which are actually pretty much exposed to some of the challenges people are speaking in the news. And I know that it's very easy just to dismiss it and say, "Hey, that's just big media, blah blah blah." But I can tell you personally, I've seen. I wouldn't even go very far. People can just go and check the flooding that happened in Nigeria not recently. Nigeria has 36 states, and 34 out of 36 states were massively impacted by those flooding. That is the kind of challenges actually we're talking about. And what we're saying here is when people are talking about making a difference, this is what, for example, the investment can help bring, basically, sort of help people to, let's say, have a much more resilient life, not just a question of saving life, but also creating and building economies. And the other thing with regard to returns, this is also something people need to know. I know a lot of time the perception of risk in Africa is investment in Africa project is very high. But and I learned it recently. I went to a conference. Do you know that the actual default rate in Africa is 0.83%, only behind America, who is 0.882%? Which means that most of the time when people invest into Africa, in majority of the case, not only they getting they getting great return because emerging markets, so obviously the possibility to make great return are even bigger. I'm also saying that it's actually one of the surest place from the start. It's just like people are not aware of some of those facts. They just obviously are stopping at the perception that they are seeing, and they think that's what they're getting. So I'm saying that those guys who are looking to make a difference, those guys who are looking to make money, that's a great place to do. But obviously, for you to make sure that you don't obviously stumble across project that will actually won't be good for you, you want to make sure that you talk to the right people, people that know the space, people that know the place, and people can actually help you and guide you do that. For example, if you were to say, "Hey, I want to invest into some renewables energy projects, or somehow renewable project," definitely talk to us or talk to people like myself. So we are here for you. I'm saying those are great opportunities where you can actually not only make a lot of money, and I'm talking about a lot of money, but also definitely make sure that you make a difference. That's what I would say.
Incredible stuff. Genuinely, I'm humbled by the work you're doing, and bringing that awareness, because that is what we're missing. I can tell you from someone born and raised in America, that education and that understanding of, I mean, even that investment return for Africa is just mind blowing, and it's going to take some time to really set in. So I really do appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I think, yeah, that is what I like these conversations. I think for me, I think I've been fortunate. Obviously, I grew up in the continent. I've been fortunate enough to travel the world, went to a different continent, and I know a lot of people. A lot of people, they want to do good stuff. It's just like they just don't not aware, and that's what, for example, with renewables in Africa, and also we're launching. Shingi knows that, a podcast which is called Renewables in Action. Idea for us to talk about the space on a global level, and to connect the dots, from those different places, so people can really see and make sense of out of it. And yeah, so those are the kind of initiatives that we need, because I believe there's a lot of good people out there. They want to do good things. They're just not aware and not having the right information in this kind of space. That's why, for example, I was delighted and honored when Shingi just invited me, because I know most of the time I will speak to many conferences, but not on places like the what I'm in today. But I want to reach out to new people, just say, hey guys, space is big enough. The space needs you. The space needs your innovation, your imagination, to make sure that things are done differently. And that's the reason of me obviously joining today. The fact I'm joining it, that's not a problem at all for me, because I enjoy doing it.
Nice.
You can hear me? Yeah, I think you can hear me.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Ingi,
Yeah, and this is just
am I
really
still
appreciate
audible,
the time.
guys?
At the yeah, we're at the top of the hour. Um, I think this has been a great discussion, Tony. Very informative about
Guys,
the
can you hear
the
me?
opportunities. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me at all?
Can you hear Shingi, Tony? He's talking to you.
Okay, I couldn't hear you a minute ago. Can you repeat, Chingy, please? Sorry.
No, I was just saying,
Hi,
this
Chingy.
it's been great to have you on. Yeah,
Guys,
can
can you
you
hear me?
hear me?
You
Yeah.
you must accidentally have Shingy muted. Maybe not sure. But basically, Shingy, I can help you out. He's just thanking you, Tony, for coming on, and it's been a pleasure, honestly. And then Shingy, was there anything you wanted me to relay to him as we kind of close out?
No, I mean, I'll send him a WhatsApp later on, but no, it's been great. I hope everyone's having myself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. Shingy just said he'll link up with you on WhatsApp later today. We're gonna get this on YouTube. That way you can share with your communities, and we can keep pushing this agenda of taking
Yeah.
accountability for what we're doing. So we
Oh,
appreciate you coming on.
that's superb. I think definitely anybody here, feel free to connect. Either here on Discord now that I'm the space. I'll make sure that I stick around. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and happy to have further conversations with people that are interested. Like I said, yeah, blockchain investor, definitely, guys, we need you.
All right, Tony. You have a good evening.
Again, I think hopefully you can hear me. I think I'll.
Yeah, no, I was actually talking to the muted mic per usual, Tony. No, we appreciate you coming on, my friend. We're gonna start up some music. I got a nice little DJ set I'm gonna throw on some really good music. Got a nice little playlist for about an hour, and then we might have a guest in 1 hour. We're just double checking. If not, we will play some games, do some Discord party stuff. We're gonna call this our little fun time break. Grab some food, grab some water, some drinks, whatever you want to indulge in. We're gonna hang out and party for the next couple hours, and really just take in the information we've got and enjoy some good vibes. So in the meantime, if you need anything, just tag me, DM me. But if not, enjoy the music. Again, shout out to Tony for coming in. Shout out to all the other panelists and speakers. I look forward to the rest of the event. Enjoy the music, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Bye.
And just a reminder, if you want to turn down the tempo bot or turn up the tempo bot, long hold on it on mobile or right click on the desktop. I'm going to go ahead and shuffle it up.